You do not pull away because you do not care. You pull away because caring has cost you before, and your nervous system has not forgotten the bill. Most people call it emotionally unavailable and leave it there, as if it is a flaw you simply chose. But emotional unavailability is not a character defect. It is a strategy. A survival strategy that worked once. And the part that should unsettle you is this: it is still working. You are still here, still intact, still functional, still breathing, and still completely alone inside a life that looks fine from every angle except the one that matters. The question is not why you shut people out. The question is what you are still trying to protect that you have not been able to name yet. Because that answer is far more unsettling than the distance itself. There is a version of this story that most people accept. They were hurt once, they built walls, and now intimacy feels threatening. It sounds tidy. It sounds like a wound you could point to on a map and say, that is where it started. But that version leaves out the most important part. The part that explains why the walls never come down even when the threat has been gone for years. Emotional unavailability is not just protection from other people. It is protection from a version of yourself you are not ready to meet. The version that needed something deeply and was told, explicitly or silently, that needing was dangerous. That wanting too much would cost you the very connection you were reaching for. And so you learned something that slowly rewired how you move through the world. Want less, need less, feel less, reveal less. The psychology behind this is precise. When the nervous system is exposed to emotional environments where vulnerability was followed by rejection, abandonment, or humiliation, it begins to associate emotional openness with threat. This is not weakness. This is your brain's trauma response doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect you from a pain it has already measured and recorded. The problem is that it cannot distinguish between the past and the present. It cannot tell the difference between the person who hurt you and the person standing in front of you now, completely safe, asking nothing more than to be let in. And this is where it gets darker. The most commonly misunderstood truth about emotional unavailability is that it rarely feels like fear from the inside. It does not show up as trembling or obvious dread. It shows up as preference. It shows up as needing your space. It shows up as being someone who values independence and does not like feeling crowded. It shows up as consistently choosing partners who are a little bit out of reach, a little bit unavailable themselves, because at some unconscious level, you understand that distance is the only architecture in which a relationship can feel safe to you. This is one of the quietest and most devastating consequences of unprocessed attachment wounds. You do not fear love in theory. You fear what love requires of you in practice. Because in practice, love requires that you be seen, fully, not partially. And being seen is the one thing you have spent years making sure never fully happened. Think about the moments in a relationship where things were genuinely going well, where someone was consistently present, consistently warm, consistently choosing you without an agenda. For most people, that feels like relief. For someone living behind emotional walls, it often feels like pressure, like something is about to go wrong, like you are quietly waiting for the moment they discover who you really are beneath the version you have offered them, and recalibrate everything. That low-level unease in the presence of genuine safety is not a personality quirk. That is cognitive dissonance. The gap between what your nervous system has been trained to expect love to feel like and what love actually is when it arrives undamaged. And the way most people respond to that dissonance is by creating distance, not dramatically, not with a scene, but quietly and methodically. They become a little cooler, a little less available. They convince themselves they are simply busy, or that the other person is a little too much, or that the connection was never quite right. And slowly they return themselves to the familiar geography of emotional isolation, a place that is lonely but does not feel dangerous. And this is the part most people completely miss. What you are protecting yourself from is not just the possibility of being hurt again. What you are protecting yourself from is the possibility of being fully known and found lacking. The possibility that if someone truly saw all of you, the fear and the need and the parts you have carefully kept in shadow, they would eventually leave, not out of cruelty, but because somewhere deep underneath the adult logic and the composed exterior, There is a younger version of you that was taught your fullness was too much, that your needs were inconvenient, that your emotions were a burden rather than a natural expression of being human. The protection is not just from pain, it is from exposure. From the imagined moment when the person who claims to love you finally sees the parts you have hidden, and their face changes. That moment lives inside your nervous system with more power than almost any real threat you have ever faced. And it is running your relationships in ways you cannot always clearly see from where you are standing. So here is the question you actually need to sit with. Not whether your walls make sense, they do. Not whether you have good reasons for them, you do. But this: what has protecting yourself from that imagined ending already cost you in the present? Because while you have been bracing against a loss that has not happened, you have been experiencing a different kind of loss every single day. The loss of depth, the loss of being truly met by another person, the loss of the intimacy you would not allow yourself to receive. The protection has not prevented loss. It has only changed its shape. And at some point, the honest question becomes which version of loss you can actually live with long term. This next part is the one that changes everything. The deepest layer of emotional unavailability is not about other people at all. It is about the relationship you have with your own inner world. Most people who are emotionally unavailable in relationships are also emotionally unavailable to themselves. They do not process grief. They manage it. They do not sit with loneliness. They schedule around it. They do not examine fear. They override it with movement, productivity, and forward momentum. Because the same rules that apply outward apply inward. If feeling deeply with another person is dangerous, feeling deeply while alone is not much safer either. This is why emotional unavailability is so difficult to dismantle through willpower or awareness alone. Because the wall is not only facing outward toward other people, it is also facing inward, keeping parts of your own experience at a careful arm's length. The self-protection is total, and it produces a very specific kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one, but the loneliness of being unreachable even to yourself. The feeling of watching your own life from a slight interior distance, never quite landing fully inside it. And here is what nobody talks about. The moment emotional unavailability begins to shift is never the moment someone finally breaks through from the outside. That is a fantasy. Walls do not yield to love applied from the other side. They shift when the person inside them begins to trust, slowly, imperfectly, and non-linearly, that their own emotional world is survivable, that they can feel the fear without disappearing into it, that they can be seen, partially, by someone genuinely safe and still be standing afterward, that the loss they have been quietly bracing against their entire lives might never arrive, and that even if it does, they are no longer the version of themselves who cannot survive it. Emotional unavailability has never been the absence of feeling. It has always been the presence of too much feeling, held too tightly for too long, by someone who was never shown that it was safe to let it move through them. That is the truth this entire video was building toward. Not that you are broken, not that your walls are wrong, but that what you have been protecting has already begun to outlive its purpose. And somewhere underneath all of it, there is a version of you that is quietly exhausted from standing guard over an emptiness and calling it safety. There is a question that lives just beyond this one, about what happens inside you the moment you begin to lower the wall even slightly, and why that first real moment of openness tends to feel like grief before it ever feels like freedom. That is a different and darker psychology entirely, and it begins somewhere else. But before you go, has someone ever gotten close enough to feel genuinely real to you, and you found yourself pulling back without being able to explain it, even to yourself? Drop it in the comments. You are not the only one who has felt that.